I think we've done a good job. I think there's a much higher level that we need to get to. I thought the first week I was disappointed with the way our tackles played inside. I was just disappointed how we played against the run and how we finished. I think we keep getting into a groove late in our pass rush that needs to start earlier. This last week, though, I was very proud of the way we played the run. I thought those guys inside took the challenge upon themselves, really worked at it, played our technique. We're technique sound, and I think it made a huge difference in the overall outcome. No matter what I tell you, it's always going to be tough without Jermaine, and that's what happens when you lose a great player. But that's why we take pride in this defensive line, in this program, that we coach every single one of those guys. So every one of those guys in that room is being prepared for an opportunity just like that. So when you hit the field, the expectation, the standard's the same. And sometimes you're not going to get those splash plays, but in terms of being assignment sound, we should play at a high level, and our defense and our teammates should depend on us. And I thought that wasn't the case enough in the first game. I thought this second game we did a much better job.
Hi, Robert Hodrobino, Devil's Digest. When you look at the two quarterbacks, the one you played last week, Doug Brumfield, and Jaron Hall, you're playing this week. I know physically they're probably built different, but still very two mobile quarterbacks. Can you draw someone on the experience, especially in the second half, what you did against Brumfield, that you can really translate to Jaron Hall this week?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And look, that's always going to be the challenge. We get the same thing at every level that I've ever been in, but I think people need to understand this, okay? There's 5 offensive linemen. There's 4 defensive linemen. So there are 6 gaps to get out of. There's 4 of us. And so we've got not only to rush and defeat our blocks, but we've got to eliminate those other 2 gaps, wherever they are. And that's a challenge. You play Russell Wilson's, even when you play Aaron Rodgers, they just know how to step up and out. And these 2 guys, there's so many good runners at the college level that want to run rather than throw. I think the challenge with this kid, Hall this week, Brumfeld last week, is those are guys that want to throw and can run. And so the challenge is always defeating your blocks and playing with the type of leverage and lanes that's going to dissuade him from getting out. Can you keep him in every single time? No. But you need to make it as difficult as possible. We didn't do that a couple times, and we paid the price. So when it comes to those, you can definitely grow as a defensive line in experience, learning from what we made mistakes on and how much. I could tell them all day, but when they feel it, when they go out there and make a mistake and they have to pay the price for it, trust me, it resonates a lot more. And that's what happened last week. And as you saw in the second half, we did a much better job of containing them, playing with great leverage. And it's a feat to keep a guy like that in the pocket with a 4-man rush. It's a feat. It's an accomplishment. And so the second half was an accomplishment for our D-line and for our defense.
Chris Cartman, Son of a Source. Back here, Rob. Hey, what have you thought about the rep distribution? Like how much guys are playing? Is it gone about what you would have expected? Is anybody maybe like DJ, would you like to get him more support, or how do you just kind of feel about it?
The way I hate to try to put a number on it, because I think you got to go with the flow of a game. I was disappointed in both games that we didn't get young guys in a lot earlier. I think that's the time to do it. And you can obviously guys like BJ and Guerin made the most out of their opportunities. And so I would have liked to have gotten a lot of those young guys a lot more reps at the end of both of these games. It just did not flow that way. But, however, I've been happy that we've been able to get those guys out. And I think overall, there's certain guys like DJ that have probably, I can lighten his load a little bit. And I think with Omar coming back, that's going to happen, is we're going to be able to use TJ both at 3 and nose, and we can spell him a little bit more, keep us fresh, which is going to be a necessity going the rest of the way.
Yeah, just with like BJ Green, for example, he's been so good in the reps that he's had, and yet he's like a walk-on freshman. So are you even yourself looking at it and trying to figure out how much is the right dial for him?
Here's the thing. The worst thing I could do for that kid is expose him to the elements. You know what I mean? And I think, I know sometimes it can be frustrated because he's been so productive, but within those reps, there's been some mistakes. And I think, luckily, he has not been exposed for those things. I think that kid's future is bright. You guys can now see what I saw in him. and what we saw in him when we brought him in here. But the worst thing you could do for a young kid is give them too much to eat on their plate and bend their stinger, right? I got a lot of momentum with that kid. He's doing everything right. And I think you just got to be very smart on how much you feed those kids and put them out in the elements. And, you know, when you put them out there to take on power scoops and double teams, I don't think that's really, you know, the best thing I can do for him at this point in time. But when I put him out there in situations where I know he can be at his best, which is what we've been able to do so far, I think it's better for everybody because it keeps people fresh and it also allows that kid to put his best foot forward. And so I think I understand the energy and the enthusiasm about him. I have it too. But my responsibility to the team and to him is to be very, very careful about how much I just put him out there because it still is a big man's game inside. And I want to put him in a position to be successful. So I think continuing to feel the tempo of the game and try to get him in situations where I think he can really do what he's great at. And I got to be smart about that. That's the burden that we have. But he'll be good when we get there.
Thanks.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about BJ specifically. How many snaps did he play in the first 2 games? And he's got to be a revelation to this point. You know, with
Yeah,
as well as he's
absolutely.
played.
I'm going to tell you how many. I don't know exactly how many, but it's within this right here. You can count it with 2 hands. You can count how many reps he's been in. So he's been ultra productive. I think in his last game, I think it's somewhere around 6 or 7. And then the first game, I think he was 1 for 1. I think he really got in for 1 play and got a sack. And so, hey, that's a pretty good batting percentage, right? So I just told him to savor the flavor because it's not going to always be that easy. But no, he's been a revelation, but he's doing what I brought him here to do, so it's not a big surprise to me. It's just really nice that it's happened so fast because it couldn't happen to a better kid. The kid's awesome, and I'm really happy for him.
To kind of piggyback what you're saying with the defensive line, but I know it's just through 2 games, but the communication and the chemistry you feel that the linebackers have with the D-line and even just all 3 levels of defense, how do you feel through these 2 games that the chemistry and communication has been with the group?
The chemistry's been outstanding. Communication, and I just find that in the early part of the season, communication is always the toughest part. So it's been good, but if we're going to be the type of defense that we want it to be, it has to be great. And so there have been breakdowns in communication. I think that's natural for, like I said, I've been on some really good defenses, and I think when we were with the Vikings, we had spent years together, and these guys, this is still, we have to see it for what it is. It is year 1 in this defense. Even though there's a lot of carryover from last year, there's enough change where this is different, and this is a year 1 of this defense. And so there are some checks. There are some times when we have not, we've had breakdowns in communication. I don't think it's been terrible, but I think, you know, when we're at our best is when we've streamlined it. You could tell that second half of this last game, we were on point. We communicated with each other, and the kids did a great job, and we were good. So we have not had issues with substitutions and things of that nature. That's going to be a constant struggle when you have this type of team with this many guys that can contribute. But it happens at all levels, and so I think it's been pretty good considering that you know, these kids are in year 1 of this defense. I think these kids have done a really good job, but it can be better, and I think it will be better.
Rob, what's been your assessment of the left-right thing? So with Matus moving from last year over, Tyler switching when Trevez comes on, some guys seem like more comfortable maybe on one side or better versus the other, but it's hard for me to really tell too much difference. What have you thought about it?
Yeah, old school, they used to have a base end and an open end, and really we just played the percentages. You know, everything is in the middle of the field in the NFL. That's really where it comes from. I brought it here just because of exactly what you talked about. You know, we can go field and boundary at sometimes. We've done that before. But the really is the left end takes place at your base end, usually your run stopper, and also he's also typically he's going to be your power rusher. And the majority of quarterbacks that we play are right-handed, and so left ends hate it because when you win, the quarterback can see you, so they know when to escape, which is why the blind side is so important. So right ends are typically can work with a little more speed, have a little bit more height and width to their rushes because the quarterback can't see them. And so they don't have to always depend on being power rushers. They can take more risks and still be able to come right back down to the level quarterback doesn't see them. Those risks happen on the left side. That guy's going to get exposed. Quarterback's going to see him step away from pressure. And so it works two ways. Run stoppers on the left typically, and some offensive coordinators are right-handed and left-handed, believe it or not, and they like to run to their right or run, you know, and it's just how it is. But it has more to do with the type of rusher that you want on that side, and he's also typically a better run stopper, and also the type of pressure you're trying to create in the face of the quarterback.
So with that in mind, how Matus, Johnson, how they look kind of in on the other sides of where they were last year sometimes.
Say it one more time, please.
How have Matus and Johnson looked when they've been playing on the other side versus maybe what they did last year at times? Like Matus
Oh
went
yeah,
right.
you know, so Tyler, for the most part, we've trained him on both sides. That's how we did it last year. Matus was pretty much left-handed. Now he's a sharp guy. Where it always comes through, it's like throwing right-handed and left-handed. This is like why right tackles in the NFL can sometimes struggle on the left side and vice versa. And you saw that with, I think, Penei Sewell, right? They moved him to right, and he wasn't the same guy. It's very much like throwing a football. It's a motion. So pass rush is typically where you see that drop-off. And it's true, like when Matus moves over to the right, there's a little bit of a clunkiness to him. Tyler's a little bit of a different rusher off the left than he is from the right. But he's a better rusher on the left, believe it or not. So that's why when we go with him and Vez is right-handed. There's no doubt about it. Vez likes to go on both sides, but Vez is a better rusher off the right side, and Vez can get a little bit high. I want that to the right side, to the blind side. And so they've looked good. I think they've improved, but Tyler's a guy that, a lot like when we had Daniil Hunter, we trained him on both sides. So Daniil isn't right-handed or left-handed. He feels comfortable wherever. And Tyler's a bit of the same guy when it comes to pass rushing. Matus, there's not a big drop-off, but he's such a rhythm guy. He's a better rusher on the left.
Got it, thanks.
Doug Haller with The Athletic. Rob, Darian Butler's not one of your guys, but he's
Oh, he's my guy.
he's made a big impact.
That's my dude now.
What do you appreciate or respect about how he's played so far?
You know, I got to tell you, one of the things about college football, and they told me this would happen, you know, in the NFL, everybody, it's their job. So there's this drive to be great, and there's just this constant drive to be great. And they said, you know, you can't expect kids to feel that way and be that way. And they're right. Like, you come here, and some kids, they just want to be kids. They don't always want to be football players. Sometimes they just want to be kids. You find that. And I struggle with that. I do, because I always want to coach greatness, and that's what I want. When you run into certain guys like Darian, they just have that drive. And when you meet a Daniil Hunter and you meet these, you know, like Brian O'Neill, who just got paid, like, you meet those guys and you see it, and you see that drive in them, it's just so much fun to be around. I thought as a player, I always enjoyed playing with those guys. As a coach, I love coaching them, and with Darian, I don't coach him, but he makes me feel better about my job. So I admire the kid. I think he has such a toughness to him. Such an intelligent guy, but the biggest thing about that kid, through thick and thin, good or bad, that kid's intensity is through the roof, and he doesn't change. You can set your watch to that guy. And I meant it. I said it. If I'm in a fight, man, I love my D-line. I want those guys with me. But the first dude is going to be number 20, because I know that dude's he's going to fight to the end, and that's a guy that's going to have my back. And so I just admire him as a person. I think he's a hell of a player. And I'll tell anyone who listens, you know, we do that top 20 every year that we rank, and I almost stood on the table. I made everybody laugh, because before anybody, I was like, 20. It was Darian Butler to me, even though I love Lole and Tyler and all those guys. I have them up there. Darian Butler to me is he's a special type of player, and you can see he makes plays, but I don't know if you guys can also see how he gets everybody around him better, and that's just the kind of person he is. I think he'll be a success. Anyway, I hope the NFL has a place for him someday, because I know he's a little guy, but that little dude plays bigger than a lot of guys I saw on Sundays.
And Coach, I mean, looking at BYU, I know you talk obviously about your defensive line and the two offensive lines you face, but what do you see the challenge when you look at them on film with their offensive line, and obviously with how their quarterback plays? How do you feel that they mesh, but what problems does their offensive line cause when you look at them?
Oh, first of all, they're all 27 years old, aren't they? But no. Those guys are mature, big, strong, and fast. And so they play well together. Everybody has warts individually, but these guys play together. Now, the thing about it is everybody thinks, like, you watch the Utah game, and I have a lot of respect for how Utah coaches their defensive line. They do a great job. People think that, oh, they just beat them up and they were soft. They weren't soft. They run what we had to go up against every single day with Gary Kubiak. And it's that flat zone stretch that just makes you run. So I don't care how big you are, I don't care how physical you are, you have to move your feet against them. So these are big guys that run to the perimeter and make you have to move your feet and get in leverage. That's hard. And they just stay on tracks, they move so well together, they sort things out well, and they are moving. So people think like, oh, they out physical Utah. No, they get running so fast to the sideline, those guys cut it back and it's a 4-yard gain, and people in the stands say, oh, they're soft. Oh, they're soft. They're getting pushed around. They get pushed around. They're getting run around. And you have to, you're making these big guys who are used to having their feet in the ground have to move, and you're catching them when they're high-hipped and running to the sidelines. That's why I always talk about good feet with my linemen, is that they get you moving so quick and they're so disciplined. It is hard, and you have to set anchor points, and you have to be extremely, extremely diligent in your technique and in your leverage points. If you can't set anchor points, these dudes will just wash you, find the seam, get vertical, one cut, and they'll run you out the gym. And not to mention, these guys play with tempo, and these big boys get on the line and just do it again. They have great conditioning, they're very disciplined, and they're very physical. Once they get running, they will get physical once they get you moving. So it's a great challenge for my guys. And the last time we played a team like this size was UCLA, and we did a hell of a job against UCLA. But 2 weeks later, we played Oregon State. Probably wasn't as physically gifted as that group. They played like this group. They ran. They were deep off the ball, and they got side. We struggled. We struggled for 3 quarters, 2.5 quarters, till we made the adjustments and were able to play well. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge. They got guys this big that can play that outside zone scheme. I think whoever plays these, and then again, they know how to cut. They know how to make you run, find that backside seam, and make you pay for that one guy who's out of his gap. So it's a great challenge this week. And then they don't drop back pass. I don't even know, they got 1 sack because they just don't drop back. They constantly keep tight ends, backs, slide protection, seven-man protection. So it all marries up with the running game. It makes sense, but you rarely get a chance to just see them pass set and let us attack them. So they don't give up a lot of sacks, they don't give up a lot of hits, and the ball is out fast. And so all that packaged together makes it really hard for the D-line. At the end of the day, they're like, well, where are the sacks? Well, it's not really about the sacks. This week, it's about doing your job, making sure you stop the run, and affecting the quarterback and making sure that, we keep everything in front of us. If we can sack them, we can sack them. But that's not really the way they keep enough guys inside. We need to protect them and get off the field.